list, Ted.
Well, Big, let's try and wrap up this list because I know you want to talk about a couple of other things.
Yeah.
But just to show how low we sank in Port Orange in terms of our real seriousness with running a good government. We had two hires by our latest manager, a finance director and a utilities director, who in turn were city managers themselves. Retreads, I think they're called.
They were, no, don't tell me they were double dippers.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's what Chisler does in Daytona. There are 31 people in the city of Daytona Beach, right? That's why we need to get Gov stuff up. Because then you'll ask for, on an Excel spreadsheet, you will ask for the payroll, right? And then we'll analyze how many of these retreads. That's the newest thing in government, is to retire from one job and not just fire people, but everybody's retiring and then getting an easy job for a second job.
Yeah, and the ICMA people actually are
International County and City Manager Association, and they are incestuous.
They certainly are, and self-promoting to the point where they actually have something called a Lifesaver Award.
Yeah.
And our last manager received two of them. Why? For hiring the finance director, who was let go from, I think it was Claremont as a manager, and the utilities director who served as a manager in Groveland.
Well, you see, I think the taxpayers are starting to smarten up. And they're starting to figure out these deals that these professionals, supposed professionals, are pulling on the taxpayers.
Yeah, and then they want to blame me for being some kind of ogre.
For mentioning it,
and for
right?
chasing all these people off.
You're not supposed to mention it in good company. You know?
No, I guess not. And then
So we hired these two people, and they didn't last very long.
No, sir, they did not last very long. I think the finance guy maybe a year, a little over, and the utilities director 3, 4, 6 months, and he was gone.
We still got problems.
We still have problems. Absolutely, we have problems. And then the last example from this list, we had an incident. You referenced it earlier, $411,000 worth of unauthorized spending.
Yeah.
And certainly the first.
Now, these were for water meters. Were these water meters we bought ahead of time, or water meters we just didn't need?
Well,
or was it water meters?
I think there were many things in that purchase. Water meters was one of them. Now, when you say did we need them, that opens up an issue that we can't get to today, the whole water meter fiasco.
Got it.
But certainly it was commonly understood that we needed them.
Yeah, so we had all the water meters that were, many water meters dysfunctional in City of Port Orange, and then we couldn't build Daytona Beach Shores correctly, and then we put in new water meters, and they, in fact, have a high incidence of
and we have the large meter program that is flawed at this point, that we haven't even gotten to. We haven't made any effort to give any numbers on. But anyway, back to this $411,000. When that finally came to light, and they had to bring it to council, their first two efforts looked like efforts to hide, to deceive council.
Well, they probably were.
They were, and I think they are what ultimately did in the utilities director and the finance director, the effort to deceive at that point. But then to make matters worse, they tell us that had they been using a computer module to track purchases by contract, perhaps this problem wouldn't have happened. And we say, well, gee, wouldn't it be great? We should go right out and buy this program. Big, it turned out they'd purchased that program 2 years earlier and just never installed it. And back to the theme of this little email, Mr. Mayor, that was not a mistake. That was apathy.
Yeah.
And nonfeasance on the part of the finance.
Totally.
Absolutely, Big.
Wow.
And then
so you've written this to Al Green because he was questioning the city?
Because he and his supporters have been just incessant with, that means continuous, with this drumbeat of these are only mistakes. We've got to put it behind us, and we've got to start
playing.
Move happy days. Move on.
Yeah.
Move on to the theme of happy days,
right.
and here again type thing. And then finally, Big, I do take this serious, and I think it was Jim, one of the callers, called in and he referenced the quest for better government. That is the true quest here. It's not just finance. Finance is really just the example in Porters, but it's the quest for good government. Now, we had a terrible example earlier over the last couple of years where the mayor became privy to some very important information. The first had to do with the sweetheart arrangement for the former finance director, the basis on which he was going to leave the city. And the second was, we talked about it here, the payroll misappropriations. In both instances, the mayor became privy to that information and did not share it with the rest of council. And that is not something that
Why
we can
would he
tolerate.
not do that?
Well, you'd have to ask him that.
All right.
Now, I supplied my answer, and I think it was to game the system.
Yeah.
I think he possessed greater knowledge than the rest, and he who has the most knowledge can oftentimes rue the day.
Right. Okay. All right. What about the dirt? Is that the list?
Yeah, that was the list.
All right. What was the other one that I asked you to talk about? I forget what the other email was. Now, Dan read it.
I don't know.
You don't remember? Well, tell me about the dirt. There's been a lot of writings about dirt.
Yeah, there has, and I don't know how much of it is accurate. What the questions, even the supposition behind the questions, I don't even know how much of it is accurate. Only because the city cannot disclose or will not disclose the nuts and bolts of any transaction. This should